Hi, I am Michael Santos with ComplianceMitigation.com. We're always striving to provide as much content as we possibly can to keep more people out of government investigations and out of the crosshairs of prosecutors who like to bring charges for white collar crimes. We've met so many people in prison who made decisions on the job not knowing how those decisions could bring them into a problem with the law, that we really believed our entire team really believes that we need to provide more content that will help people what happens and what follows. And one of the ways that we do that is we create these new case studies every day. And today we're going to be profiling, or I'm going to be making this video and an audio file of an individual who's now facing a criminal indictment and potentially going to prison because of some decisions that he made on the job. And today we're going to be covering the case of an individual by the name of Keith Berman, who had served as the Chief Executive Officer of Decision Diagnostics Corporation, DECN, which is a medical device company based right here in California, in Southern California, where we are located. Now, if you are interested in this type of a content and you want to get the follow-up material that includes quizzes that you can show that you're training your team on compliance and best practices and avoiding white-collar crimes, visit us at compliancemitigation.com. We've got an abundance of resources to help you. But for the purposes of this case study, let's just go ahead and start reading through what you're going to see. In this case study, participants are going to learn the consequences that follow for people that provide false or misleading information to investors or really even to consumers. So the chief executive officer of a publicly traded company began publishing a series of false and misleading statements on a messaging board. And the CEO created an alias in an effort to disguise his identity. It's important to pay attention here what the ramifications can follow just for doing that. Because if somebody is creating an alias to post information that might deceive people, we've got to begin thinking about how will investigators perceive that action in and of itself. Does that imply a guilty mindset? Investigators with the Securities and Exchange Commission became aware of the CEO's messaging and launched an investigation. So this is another subject that I think business team members need to be aware of, is how does an agency learn about a company and when do they start investigating? The CEO lied during the investigation. Well, that's a federal crime. Now, you don't have to talk to a government investigator or a government agent, but if you do, you'd better tell the truth, because there are federal crimes that attach just to telling a lie to a government investigator. And if you want to learn more about that, make sure that you sign up for our course, Compliance 101. Federal prosecutors later convened a grand jury. A lot of people don't know what a grand jury is, but it is an investigative body where that part of the investigative process where the prosecutor will convene a grand jury and bring information to the grand jury, and there's no representation, defense representation, so it's just the prosecutor presenting this information, and they will eventually ask the grand jury to return an indictment, which is a criminal charge, and a serious one at that. So in this particular indictment, they charged the CEO with securities fraud and with making false statements. And the indictment exposes the defendant to the potential loss of liberty and forfeiture of personal property. So if you were enrolled in the course and you were going through it, you can test it for free just by clicking this button, Compliance 101, on the sidebar of any of our articles. The participants are going to be able to understand securities fraud, what it means to make a false statement, grand jury proceedings, and the implications of forfeiture laws and how that can apply to any individual and the family members. So the common terms that we're going to learn are securities fraud, making false statements, grand juries, indictments, and forfeiture. So in the current state, when we talk about these case studies, we like to say, well, really, what's going on in the business community today? Well, many people that work in normal business settings engage in behavior that can attract the attention of government investigations. And those investigations can lead to fines, injunctions, disgorgement, and potentially charges for white-collar crimes. It's our job to try and help people avoid that. And if they do get in problems with a government investigation, we want to give them mitigation strategies as well. Because people don't know what they're doing, and if they don't know what they're doing, they can expose their colleagues, they can expose the company, they can expose themselves to severe consequences, including criminal charges. So what's the future state? What is it we're trying to do, our team at Compliance Mitigation? Well, we want to provide ongoing training. We help business professionals understand the costs and consequences of misbehavior. The more people know about such consequences, the better prepared they become to avoid the type of behavior that can lead to investigations and white-collar crime prosecutions. Now, everybody on our team has gone through a government investigation. Everybody on our team has gone through a criminal prosecution. We have a real depth and breadth of experience on this. And so when we're communicating to you, we're not doing so from a manner of just, telling you theoretically. We're people who've actually gone through it. We're the tour guides. We've gone through it. I personally went through a government investigation and went to prison for 26 years because I really didn't know how to respond. And I think that's the case even more so for people in today's community that are working in a business setting and don't really understand the implications of some of the decisions that they are making. So our team at Compliance Mitigation really strives to provide that information. And we do so by really just following this S-bar kind of analysis, where the situation here is we're profiling Keith Berman, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Decision Diagnostics. And it led to a criminal indictment. So if you visit our site and you look at this particular story, you could actually see what a criminal indictment looks like. I can just load it up right here. I can go to the criminal indictment, make it bigger, let the team see it. This is what an indictment looks like. And in an indictment, we see one of the ugly things that says United States of America versus Keith Berman. So we've got to think of how that plays out in the mindset of somebody who is really looking at a criminal charge. It makes them very difficult to overcome that in the eyes of a jury, because a juror doesn't really understand, well, why is the whole United States against this person? Then we've got the different charges. This is Title 15, United States Code, Statutes 78J and 7850FF, 17 CFR. So all of these statutes, what's important to realize is in the United States, we have so many laws on the books, so many regulations. I mean, more than 4,000 criminal statutes, more than 1 million regulations. It's easy for people to fall into problems with the criminal justice system, even though they may not know they're doing something wrong. I don't think that's the case with Mr. Berman. This indicates that there was some criminal intent, but I think there's something that we can all learn even from this type of thing. So this is what the criminal indictment looks like. Let's continue on with the case study. So according to the indictment, Berman misled investors about his own compensation. Prosecutors state that Berman's misrepresentations were material. That means that people may have made investment decisions based on what Berman said, and that brings forward the potential for criminal liability. In early 2020, Berman and his company were experiencing financial difficulties, so he wrote an email suggesting that how he intended to exploit the global pandemic as an opportunity to deceive investors, allowing him to raise millions of dollars, which he in fact did, according to the indictment. Berman made false statements about DECN's ability to develop and market a test that would detect whether a person had the coronavirus. He wrote press releases. He misrepresented news that he received from government officials, and he lied about what he learned from his business vendors. Despite a vendor telling Berman that the vendor's product would not detect COVID-19, Berman continued to publish false and misleading information on message investor boards describing his company. Further, Berman created a fictitious account in an effort to conceal that he was the person behind the misrepresentations. So he's CEO, but instead of representing himself as being the CEO, he's created this false identity and started to, hype up the stock. And as a result of his false and misleading statements, the company's stock price did in fact rise more than 1,500%, and he was steadily selling his stocks into that wave of buying. So that, of course, triggered an investigation from the Securities and Exchange Commission, who questioned Berman under oath. Now, again, a person doesn't have to talk, but if he doesn't talk, there are going to be implications to that, but at least he won't be committing a crime. Here, he lied to the investigators And the investigators then brought that evidence to a prosecutor, which brought a grand jury, and then they brought a criminal charge against him, or several. So investigators with the SEC questioned Berman. I already said that. They convened a grand jury in federal district court. Here's where we describe what a grand jury is. It's a group of people that listen to evidence investigators gather to implicate a person in federal crimes. And the members of the grand jury, and I think there's something like between 8 and 18 or something like that. And these are people that are just sitting there listening to whatever the prosecutor says. And then the prosecutor asks them to return an indictment. And the prosecutors generally do. So they charge them for crimes related to securities fraud and making false statements to law enforcement. And as a result, Berman now faces the loss of liberty for up to 20 years. So not only did he expose himself to a problem by lying, he exposed investors, according to the government, to losses. So those losses are going to influence the potential exposure he has to a criminal sentence. So in our case study, we also offer an analysis. And here I'm going to read to you and give you a little extra commentary as I'm reading. So according to the information presented by the government, Berman made decisions with a clear intention to deceive investors. Although he may have lived most of his life as an honorable person, the evidence suggests that he got into financial trouble. Rather than responding to his troubles in an honorable way, he concocted a scheme to pump up the price of his stock. And when they started questioning him, he got himself into further trouble by lying in response to the questions the investigators asked. So here's what you got to remember. If a government investigator is asking questions, there's a good chance they've already got the information. Before they ever are going to speak to somebody, they are going to do their due diligence, because government investigations begin in secret. So what happened here? Well, we don't know exactly what happened here, but we can assume that the Securities and Exchange Commission or investigators there, they got a price alert seeing, wow, this stock is accelerating at a massive rate, rising 1,500% in a couple of months. That's going to trigger an investigation. And that investigation may say, let's work from behind the scenes and potentially talk to the client's suppliers and find out, well, why is the stock rising so high? And we know, of course, that this related to the COVID pandemic and the amount of hysteria, understandably, that was going on around the world and around the country for sure. And this guy started to misrepresent that he had a cure or something that could certainly assist with the cure of COVID. It turned out to be false. He learned that it was false because his supplier told him that the product you're trying to sell does not in any way change the implications of COVID. That didn't stop him. He continued to put out press releases. He then created a false and fictitious name, which shows this pattern of deceit as far as the government's perception is known. And of course, they can track that with IP addresses and other types of technology. Well, they summoned him to a deposition or some questioning, or perhaps brought him before a grand jury. And if he went and started to lie, that's a federal crime and exposes somebody to 5 years in prison for lying to an investigation. So, then we offer in our case study here, not only an analysis, we make recommendations of what we think business owners should be doing to avoid problems with both civil and criminal law enforcement agencies. And we really think that people need to know more about the situation like Mr. Berman. And that's why we create these case studies every day. If you look on the sidebar and you scroll down here to case study library, you can just click on it and you'll see that we're publishing case studies, and they've got links to all different types of industries and sectors and people and agencies. And you can look for specific people. Like there's a kind of a famous person, Elizabeth Holmes, who is the CEO of Theranos, soon to be facing a criminal trial for her role in securities fraud and misleading investors. So we encourage employees and business leaders to get an idea of how easily decisions made that deceive people can result in white-collar criminal charges. And more importantly, we encourage people to implement good training and best practice techniques. Everybody on our team has gone through a criminal investigation and served time in prison. And one thing we recognize is that people who go into the system frequently will make the statement that they didn't know or understand what happened. And that's the reason that we've created Compliance 101, a great tool to help anybody. You can test it out for free. Just visit the sidebar of our site and you'll see Compliance 101. When you see the sidebar of the site, enter. All you got to do is give us your name, your email, the best email where we can send it to you, some contact information. Try it out for free for 30 days. And what you'll get is the ability to go through some of these case studies, see the quizzes, test them. And the beauty of that is then you can drop these quizzes into every person's HR file who's gone through the quiz, their QR code identified. So the person will populate his file and demonstrate his commitment to good training. Of course, what that does for the business owner is it may protect somebody in the event that there is a government investigation. The business owners and team leaders can be showing the commitment they make to compliance training and hopefully qualify for a deferred prosecution agreement, or even better, a non-prosecution agreement. And if you want to learn more about those very important terms, make sure that you visit us at compliancemitigation.com. I am Michael Santos. I want to thank you for being a part of our community. We do ask you to subscribe to the channel. We produce new content every day. You can also get us on our iTunes channel at Compliance Mitigation. As our motto says, we did the time so you don't have to. Learn about our contributors just by visiting our team at compliancemitigation.com. So we'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Thank you.